You've tuned in to another installment of the Blackpages Mixtape. This is volume 5, entitled Black Mother Goddess, aka One Blood. And as always, we start off all these segments free. Dr. York. And I just want to say, for generations, our people have always prayed to God for help as far as our condition on the planet, and ask God to help us and guide us and things like that. But when we have people like that grown amongst us who devote their lives to the upliftment of our people, that is God's help. So we should always support and show appreciation for people who sacrifice themselves for our situation here in the West and globally as Africans. But I also like to introduce myself. I'm the voice of the Blackpages, Patah Hutep Asare, and I just want to start this off just to speak on it. Previously, in past volumes of the Blackpages, specifically in volumes 2 and 3, the two-part section called Reality of a Black Planet, we established that black people, Africans, were the first people to walk the face of the earth. We also established that Egypt is in Northeast Africa and that it existed since time immemorial according to the Egyptians themselves and according to the people who actually lived in that region. Okay, we also established that to the Egyptians, their Naturu or Natiru, for your research purposes, for lack of a better word, gods, misinterpreted as gods, were at one time physical beings who lived and ruled. Thus, the period of time referred to in the Egyptians' kings list as the Zep-Tepi, also referred to as the first time. Now, these points, especially the points about the Zep-Tepi and the physical deities walking the face of the earth and their contributions and things, these will be very important going forward because we're going to build off of those same principles. So if you haven't listened to it, check out Blackpages Volume 2 and 3 to kind of get an understanding of that. And what we'll be going to, we'll be moving far beyond the scope of biblical references to what would be termed biblically as pre-Adamic people. And what I mean by that, people who will walk the face of the earth prior to Adam. As we know, there were tribes of people prior to Adam and Eve, the so-called biblical Adam and Eve. Thus, you had the people in the land of Nod and various other things as far as that's concerned. Even though we know that all your biblical characters are fictitious people as far as them being literal people that walk the faces of the earth, they're all fictitious people. And we'll not only explore the fact that the woman came first from a scientific perspective, but we'll also attempt to pinpoint the origin of the matriarchy and the transition to the patriarchal system. We will find these points that they're not necessarily written in his story, because these things predate established his story, but can be tracked via the tribal customs of indigenous peoples and their so-called mythologies. And I say so-called mythologies, like it was said in the Blackpages Reality of a Black Planet. We're so old as far as black people. Our actual history goes back to what is termed as mythology. So once you start tracking our history back so far, you're going to run into a time that predates written records. And it's going to go into what's called so-called mythology. And it's recorded and it's still kept alive via the tribal customs of indigenous peoples. So we know certain things actually happened and certain things did exist, whether they are written down or recorded or not. Okay? Now I just want to kind of frame the discussion as we always do. I'm going to start it off and I'm going to quote specifically from 2 books in this introduction. Both of them were received by the Reverend Dr. York. The first book I'm going to quote from, and we're going to jump back and forth because these 2 works complement each other, is going to be the Holy Tablets, alright, and Sacred Records of Atum-Re, Chapter 1, also known as the Black Book. So, the first quote, it'll come from Chapter 1, Tablet 9, verse 254 of the Holy Tablets. Alright? Alright? and verse 254, because a person's DNA keeps getting mixed by the genes of the generational fathers, comparisons of the DNA in the nucleus of the cell, which comes half from mother and half from father, do not work well after several generations. It was discovered that in addition to the DNA in the cell's nucleus, some DNA exists in the mother's cell, but outside the nucleus in bodies called mitochondria. This DNA does not get mixed with the father's DNA. Instead, it is passed unaltered from mother to daughter, to granddaughter, and so on through the generations. Thus, it is perfect to trace ancestral relations. This discovery by Douglas Wallace of Emory University in the 1980s led him to compare this mitochondria of about 800 women. The surprising conclusion, which he announced at a scientific conference in July 1986 AD, was that the mitochondria in all of them appeared to be so similar that these women must have descended from a single female ancestor. The research was picked up by Wesley Brown of the University of Michigan, who suggested that by determining the rate of natural mutation of mitochondria, the length of time that had passed since this common ancestor was alive could be calculated. Comparing the mitochondria of 21 women from diverse geographical and racial backgrounds, he came to the conclusion that they owed their origin to a quote-unquote mitochondria Eve, who had lived in Africa between 300,000 to 180,000 years ago. Okay, that's the first quote that we're going to take, and that's from the Holy Tablets, and that basically breaks down what mitochondria DNA is, the date, and the person who is responsible for the rediscovery of mitochondrial DNA, because we'll find out that this whole concept of lineage passing from mother to daughter is not a new thing, and ancient people were aware of this. They might not have used the term mitochondrial DNA, but it was a known thing that the blood of the mother was very significant. Okay, now we'll move right along to the Black Book, Sacred Records of Atum-Re, verse 99 to 102, and it's done in question and answer form. All right. Question: so is the Y chromosome a defect of the X? Verse 99. Scientists today have discovered that the Y chromosome in sperm has 2.8% less genetic material than the X chromosome in the same sperm specimen. Researchers were able to sift sperm to produce samples in which 85% of the cells had an X chromosome. In fact, the X chromosome is 5 times larger than the Y chromosome, which means that females existed for generations without males. To get the Y chromosome out of an X chromosome, you lose one of your points. Thus, the chromosome is defected, which is why a man has the same components on his body that the woman does. For example, the breasts and nipples. However, men don't breastfeed. Men are a genetic defect of women. Okay, and that was from the Black Book. And that basically expresses the similarities and the differences between the body of a man and a woman. And this is all coming from a scientific perspective. Okay, and it's all things that we can all relate to. We all look at it. We can all physically see these differences. Okay. The next excerpt is from Sacred Records of Atum-Re, the Black Book, verse 114 to 115. Question: so where did the Y chromosome come from? The Y chromosome comes from the female scientist as Ninty, known as Mother Ninty or Nonette, who experimented with the side of an X chromosome, maiming it by removing 2.8% of X chromosomes. This resulted in a maimed lower right stem, giving the appearance of a Y, which produces less genetic material, resulting in a Y chromosome called chromosomal manipulation, a well-known experiment today. All of this is nature at work. From nature, you get nurture, as in mother who breastfeeds or nurtures her young. Mother Nature. Okay? So with that, we're delving into what caused this change, or what caused the differentiation in the sexes. And that's why they call it the X and the Y chromosome, because it's not because they just for some reason felt the need to use an X and a Y because it just sounded cool or whatever. They use the X and a Y because it literally, when you view the chromosome, they literally look like an X and a Y. One has a stem that's broken off, so it takes the appearance of a Y. But it goes back into what is referred to as so-called Sumerian mythology, where they talk about the deities that actually came down and manipulated the genetics of the beings on the planet. It may sound far-fetched to some people, but this information is gradually making its way into the mainstream. And this is the same story of Adam and Eve. And instead of a story where somebody just magically snaps their fingers and then two human beings are alive on the planet, in the longer version of the Sumerian story, you see how it's a process of trial and error that happened over thousands of years. And make no mistake about it, the entire book of Genesis is a Babylonian creation story. Hebrews don't have a creation story. They received the book of Genesis while they were in bondage in Babylon up under Nebuchadnezzar. But that's a whole nother conversation in itself. Chapter 1, Tablet 9, verse 56 through 60 of the Holy Tablets is where we're about to take this next quote from. Okay, verse 56. From about 225 million years ago to 65 million years ago, which is the period of time often referred to as the dinosaur age, evolved two main lines of egg-laying reptilians. Those who could fly, which evolved into birds like the pterodactyls, from the Greek pteron, meaning feather, wing, and dactylus, from the Greek for feather, for finger. And those who roamed and dominated the planet Earth as dinosaurs, called the Tyrannosaurus rex, tyrant, reptile, or terrible lizards. These reptiles evolved alongside with a variety of amphibians and water lizards away from the ocean and their water life, which was full of activity. When humans came out of the water, your evolution jumped billions of years. When humans crawled on land, they were in the form of what looked like a crocodile. And I just want to emphasize that right there. That was the end of verse 60, but I just want to emphasize that when humans came out of water, your evolution jumped billions of years. So, and it's in multiple different cultures and multiple different civilizations all over the planet, there are stories that talk about this same phenomenon happening. Some beings or whatever that came from somewhere that had a hand in speeding up the evolutionary process of human beings on the planet. So this is not just something that appears in the Sumerian story. This is something that appears all throughout the whole of Africa, something that appears all throughout your Native American cultures. Different cultures speak of the same thing happening. Okay, the next excerpt I like to take is from the Holy Tablets, chapter 1, tablet 9, verses 114 through 120. 114. Amongst the different species of evolutionary human, you have the Australopithecines. There were two forms of Australopithecines that could walk and were erect. Their brains were 1/3 the size of a modern human's brain. The smaller ones stood about 4 feet tall and weighed between 50 to 120 pounds. This was your original pygmy, Keshite, and Havilite tribe, which your mother Hawa, Eve, came from. They had 9 ether hair. The larger ones were 7 foot and weighed 222 to 250 pounds. This was your original Watusi Kuthite tribe, which Kedman, Adam, came from. They had 8 ether hair. They were the giants in the earth. All other humans had 6 ether hair, as other animals of the planet Earth. 9 ether hair is a symbol of an extraterrestrial being. All animals and humans on this planet have 6 ether hair. Okay, that's basically breaking down about the different types of Australopithecines, the different types of evolutionary human on the planet, and it's not limited to those two, but those are the specific two that's spoken of right there. And it basically breaks down like how we were talking about pre-Adamic people. It's talking about these are the tribes that would ultimately descend into your biblical characters, Adam and Eve. But we're talking about millions of years prior to there even being Adam and Eve. But these are the precursors to them. Okay, the next quote that I like to take is, we're going back to the Black Book, or the Sacred Records of Atum-Re. It's going to be verses 86 through 96. Okay. Question. So beings who lived on other planets and maybe even other star systems came here. Verse 87. Absolutely, this planet was being visited for millions of years by higher intelligence, so which decided to colonize and set up their home here in the seas while the planet was still undeveloped for your form of life. Where did they dwell? Some made the deep dark seas of this planet home. One such place has recently been discovered and was located in the Atlantic Ocean in the area called the Bermuda Triangle or Angel's Triangle. Question: what species, if you can call them that, were they? They were called the Meldekians, or the troglodytes, from the planet Meldek or Vulcan, a planet that astronomers have recently verified that used to pass through this solar system. NASA has it logged and photographed. What gender dominated this species? The male and female of the Meldekian species were both asexual and had the ability to procreate just as many reptiles do today. Question: can you name one? Yes, the salamanders, newts, whiptail, lizards, and many others. Question: did their new environment bring about a mutation or an evolution from one state to another? Yes. In fact, the female-dominated species had developed enlarged lungs that enabled them to live on land and in the seas as well. As time passed, the females took domination of the land or earth while the males ruled the sea. Question: what's the link between the lizard people and the mammal? The Meldekian or lizard people, some called dinosaurs, developed into intelligent humanoids by abducting and mixing their seed with prehistoric humans known as the genus Homo or Australopithecines. Question: why was this necessary? It was necessary for the adaptation to this planet as it emerged from the seas and became land. This mixture produced a mammal-like reptilian being called the human being, both carnivorous and herbivorous, able to produce asexually through the process of parthenogenesis. This process still exists in certain mammals, reptiles, and insects. Today, this is where your Dagon or Dagon worship came from, or your Tanin of the Torah, which comes from the ancient Tamaraean Tanin, serpent or dragon, from Ta for earth or Ptah. There were two forms of Australopithecines that could walk and were erect. The smaller ones stood 4 foot tall, genus Homo, where your pygmy tribe originated. Question: I see genus Homo and Homo erectus. Where does Homo sapien come in? 450,000 years ago, another group of beings called the Natiru or Anunnaki, led by Enki, arrived on Earth in search of gold to mend their planet's ozone layer. Crafts of workers were sent to mine the gold to take to their planet. This work became tiresome for the Natiru and decided to create a being for the purpose of working the mines for them. Enki chose a being that already existed on this planet to do labor. Question: how did Enki go about performing this task? Enki chose Mother Ninti, the wisest scientist and geneticist, to breed the Homo erectus with the genes of a Natiru to speed up its evolution. This was done by what is called genetic manipulation today. Ninti took the blood which carried the genes of a Natiru and mixed it with 14 females of the erectus state of evolution. However, the asexual trait from the reptilian in them still dominated, making them unable to procreate on their own. So Ninti chose to breed with the Lars, the simians, intelligent ape people whose queen was Zero, as opposed to the Akins, the evil Lars whose king was Shitar. She also bred with the chimpanzees and the gibbon, who were recognized for their intelligence. These breeds gave birth to many defected beings, some born with hair all over their bodies called hirsutism, or scales all over their bodies called ichthyosis, or with very large heads called hydrocephalic, or lupus, leprosy, gigantism, just to name a few. Many deformities, genetic deficiencies, and chromosome distortions which result in such things as Siamese twins are a result of these original crossbreeding of different species. You actually have in some human bodies cells attacking other cells, which is a result of genes from different species fighting to protect themselves. The same thing happens when the sperm of a man enters the woman's body. Her body naturally fights it because it is alien to her body. Okay. So I know we just went over quite a few things, okay, and really what that's getting into, that's the important point that I was trying to make with that was just pretty much getting into the fact that the original beings on this planet, the original evolutionary beings, whether being mixed with extraterrestrials, whatever the case may be, the original evolutionary beings on the planet were rendered asexual because they were a reptilian mammal. And I know some people might look at that as kind of far-fetched, but Dr. York has told us a long time ago that you can look between your fingers and you can see webs in between your fingers. You can look down your back and you have knots on your back like a reptile. That you know, when you get ashy, you know, you have scales. You know, so all of that is indicative of a reptile. And as we go through this, we're delving a lot into your Sumerian story. The dates that we get, the 450,000 years ago, that's according to Sumerian so-called mythology. The names Enki, En means ruler, Ki is what they call the planet Earth, Enki, ruler of the planet Earth. So we're getting into a lot of your Sumerian story, which is not, a lot of this information is not exclusive to your Sumerian story as it pertains to beings coming and speeding up the evolution of beings on the planet, but it is laid out in detail in your Sumerian story. So that's one of the reasons that we use this. Okay, the last quote that I'm going to take is from the Holy Tablets, chapter 2, tablet 4, verse 32 through 33. Okay? Verse 32. He wanted to take the Homo erectus monkey and breed it with the DNA of the Anunnaki. This first endeavor was undertaken without the permission or approval of the Most High Elyon El Anu, because that would be interfering with the ecology of the planet Earth, the chain of life, evolution, and mutation, where each living thing on and in the planet Earth and its seeds are one, depending on each other for existence. To pull out just one form of life and alter the system by upgrading or downgrading would throw everything off. Stepping into a chain of events, selecting on one breed of creature from the rest, would disrupt the natural system of things. This Anu knew. Yet the assembly of all the Anunnaki resolved amongst themselves to proceed with the project. Enlil stated that these Lulu were to be created asexual or hermaphrodites. However, Enki disagreed. He felt that the Lulus should be given total control of their reproductive organs so that they can reproduce on their own. Against this is what Anu didn't approve of. Anu was against unruly activity, uncontrolled sex. Enki took his thoughts to the Anunnaki Ninti, whereupon she also agreed to breed the Lulus with their own reproductive organs so that they wouldn't have to keep cloning and engineering. They proceeded on with their project without informing Anu. This they did without the permission of Anu.